When you think of powerful historical rulers, you probably imagine stern kings with queens and legitimate heirs. Strategic marriages, political alliances, continuing the dynasty. But here, what history textbooks conveniently ignore. Some of the most powerful monarchs in history preferred men. And they didn't hide it quietly, they flaunted it, elevated their male lovers to positions of power, built monuments to them, started wars over them. These aren't rumors or speculation. These are documented relationships that shaped empires. This is the story of 5 royal homosexuals who ruled the world. 5. King James I of England, 1566–1625. Yes, that King James, the Bible guy. The King James Bible, one of the most influential books in English history, was commissioned by a king who was openly obsessed with beautiful young men. James became King of Scotland as an infant, then inherited the English throne in 1603, uniting the crowns. He was married to Anne of Denmark. They had children. He did his dynastic duty. But everyone at court knew where his real interests lay. His most famous favorite was George Villiers, Duke of Buckingham. James called him Steenie, short for Stephen, because Villiers supposedly looked like paintings of St. Stephen. James wrote letters to Buckingham that are explicit. He calls him my sweet child and wife. He signs letters, your dear dad and husband. In one letter, James writes, I desire only to live in this world for your sake. I had rather live banished in any part of the earth with you than live a sorrowful widow's life without you. This isn't speculation. These are the king's own words. James promoted Buckingham repeatedly, making him the most powerful non-royal in England. Court observers were scandalized but powerless. The irony, the king who gave the English-speaking world its most famous Bible translation was living a life that very Bible condemned. But James didn't care. He believed in the divine right of kings. God chose him to rule, so clearly God was fine with Buckingham. 4. Emperor Hadrian of Rome, 76–138 AD. Hadrian built a wall across Britain. He was one of Rome's 5 good emperors. He expanded the empire and strengthened its borders. He was also so devoted to his male lover that when the young man died, Hadrian practically deified him. His name was Antinous, a Greek youth of extraordinary beauty. Hadrian met him around age 13 or 14 and became obsessed. They traveled the empire together. Hadrian showered him with honors. Court officials were jealous but couldn't do anything. Hadrian was the emperor. Then in 130 AD, during a trip to Egypt, Antinous drowned in the Nile. He was probably around 19 years old. Hadrian was devastated, completely destroyed. He declared Antinous a god, founded a city in his honor, Antinopolis, commissioned thousands of statues. More statues of Antinous survive than almost any other figure from antiquity except emperors and gods. Hadrian basically forced the entire Roman Empire to worship his dead boyfriend. Temples were built, priests were appointed, religious festivals were established. This wasn't subtle. This was an emperor using absolute power to immortalize his lover. Ancient sources disagree on whether Antinous' death was accident, suicide, or even sacrifice. Some suggest Antinous killed himself to fulfill a prophecy that would extend Hadrian's life. We'll never know, but we know Hadrian's grief was genuine and overwhelming. The man who built walls and expanded empires had his heart broken by a Greek teenager, and he made sure the world would never forget him. 3. King Edward II of England, 1284–1327. Edward II might be the most tragic figure on this list. He became king in 1307. England expected a warrior like his father, Edward I. Instead, they got a king who preferred poetry, rowing, and his male favorites to warfare and statecraft. His first great love was Piers Gaveston, a Gascon knight. Edward made him Earl of Cornwall, a title usually reserved for royalty. The English barons were furious. Gaveston was arrogant, insulted the nobility, and clearly had the king's ear. They forced Edward to exile Gaveston multiple times. Each time, Edward brought him back within months. Finally, in 1312, the barons kidnapped Gaveston and executed him without trial. Edward was heartbroken, but he eventually found a new favorite, Hugh Despenser the Younger. Despenser was even worse than Gaveston, greedier, more ruthless, more hated. The barons rebelled. Edward's own wife, Isabella of France, turned against him. She invaded England with her lover, Roger Mortimer. Edward was captured, forced to abdicate in favor of his son, and imprisoned. Then in 1327, he died in Berkeley Castle. The official story is natural causes. The popular story, recorded in multiple chronicles, is far darker. They say he was murdered by having a red-hot poker inserted into his body, leaving no external marks. Whether true or not, the story reveals how people saw Edward, a king destroyed by his unnatural desires. He was buried in Gloucester Cathedral. His tomb became a pilgrimage site, perhaps because people saw him as a martyr, perhaps because they pitied him. Edward II loved the wrong people and paid the ultimate price. King Frederick the Great of Prussia, 1712 to 1786. Frederick the Great was one of history's greatest military commanders. He turned Prussia into a major European power. He was also almost certainly gay and made no real effort to hide it. His father, Frederick William I, was a brutal military obsessive who despised his artistic, French-speaking, flute-playing son. When young Frederick tried to flee Prussia with his close companion Hans Hermann von Katt, his father had Katt executed, forcing Frederick to watch. This traumatized Frederick for life, but it didn't change his preferences. As king, Frederick married Elizabeth Christine of Brunswick-Bevan for political reasons. He reportedly spent one night with her, then never saw her privately again for the rest of his life. She lived in a separate palace. They had no children. Instead, Frederick surrounded himself with male companions. His court was filled with handsome young officers and intellectuals. He built Sanssouci Palace, without worry, as his personal retreat, a place where he could live as he pleased, away from Berlin court politics. Voltaire visited and later wrote mockingly about Frederick's preferences, though Voltaire was bitter after their friendship soured. Frederick never publicly acknowledged his sexuality, but he didn't need to. Everyone knew. The difference: Frederick was too powerful and too successful for anyone to challenge him. He won wars, he expanded Prussian territory, he was enlightened, cultured, brilliant. His sexuality was an open secret, but his achievements made him untouchable. 1. Alexander the Great, 356–323 BC. The greatest conqueror in history had a relationship with another man that ancient sources describe as the most important bond of his life. His name was Hephaestion, Alexander's closest companion since childhood. They grew up together, studied under Aristotle together, fought together. Ancient sources are careful with language. They call them companions or use the Greek term philoi, beloved friends. But the subtext is clear. When they visited Troy, Alexander laid a wreath at Achilles' tomb, while Hephaestion laid one at Patroclus's tomb, deliberately paralleling the most famous male couple in Greek mythology. Hephaestion was Alexander's second-in-command, his most trusted general, the man he consulted on everything. When Hephaestion died of fever in 324 BC, Alexander's grief was apocalyptic. He refused to eat for days. He lay on Hephaestion's body weeping. He had the doctor who failed to save Hephaestion executed. He ordered a massive funeral pyre, one of the most expensive in ancient history. He cut his hair in mourning, an honor usually reserved for family. He sent messengers to the oracle of Ammon asking if Hephaestion could be worshipped as a god. Ancient sources compare his grief to Achilles mourning Patroclus. The parallel was intentional and understood. Alexander never fully recovered. He died less than a year later, possibly from grief-induced recklessness. The man who conquered the known world was undone by losing the person he loved most. Notice something about these stories. The ones who lived openly and didn't apologize, Hadrian, Frederick, Alexander, are remembered as great. The ones who were punished for it, Edward II, are remembered as tragic failures. History doesn't punish powerful men for loving men. It punishes weakness. If you're strong enough, successful enough, powerful enough, your sexuality becomes a footnote. If you're not, it becomes your epitaph. These 5 rulers shaped empires. They won wars, built cities, commissioned art, changed religions. And they loved men. History tried to straightwash them, to ignore the relationships or reframe them as deep friendships. But the evidence is there, in letters, chronicles, monuments, and grief that couldn't be hidden. They weren't hiding in closets, they were ruling empires. And maybe that's the real story. These men didn't let sexuality define them, they let power define them. The rest of us spent centuries being shocked by what they never bothered to hide. If you want more stories about historical figures who lived authentically despite impossible odds, make sure to subscribe. History is full of people who refused to fit the boxes we've tried to put them in. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.